This video is the instructions for Empiric. We're going to be using the outpatient pediatric version here. This game is for 2 to 4 players. Before we play, we're going to need a copy of the game. The printable versions, there's both a full color version and a lower ink version. This will come in 2 separate PDFs that are printed duplex. Once they're printed duplex, you can laminate or not, and I do like them laminated. And then you cut on those little hash marks to cut out 9 cards per page to make your deck of case cards and your deck of antibiotic cards. The other thing you're going to want to print is the playmat. This is just 2 sheets of regular printer paper taped together. This will just make it a little bit easier for you to kind of keep track of what's going on. And there's little reminders on the text of the playmat for people that are learning the game for the first time. Now let's go through the cards that we're going to be using to play. This first set is the antibiotic cards. These are color-coded by the mechanism of action. You can see on the far left is trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole in red. And as we go to the right there, we're going to see different classes of antibiotics color-coded by where they work on the cell. So orange ones work on DNA or DNA replication. Yellow ones work on the RNA. Green works on protein synthesis. And our blues and purples work on the cell wall, like our beta-lactams. This is a close-up of a single card. You can see there's quite a bit of information on there. On the top, there's icons. This is clindamycin, so it has a topical, oral, and injected version. So it has all 3 of the icons on it. Below that is the little cartoon that shows the mechanism of action. So this one works on the ribosome, and all of the ribosome-acting ones are going to be green in color. At the bottom is the spectrum of activity. So this is just a rough clinical spectrum of activity. So Clinda is staph and strep and some anaerobes. And at the bottom are icons for some of the most important bugs for us to know. So clindamycin has the icons for anaerobic coverage and the icon for MRSA coverage. There are 2 other cards that are in the antibiotic deck that are not actually antibiotics. The first on the left there is Call Pharmacy. That is essentially a wild card. So when this card is played, you'll say clindamycin, or you'll probably say amoxicillin, and it counts as the card that you say the name of. And on the right is the observation card. While all of the infections in this game are bacterial infections, some of them can be observed without antibiotics. And for those, if you use the observation card, you're going to score 2 extra points. You'll see that band in the middle that's in blue, and the 2 dots with the number 2. That indicates that this card scores 2 points. Next up is the case cards. Case is in secondary infection of eczema. It scores 1 point. You see the 1 in the band there. There's a little bit of case details. For the most part, these are not going to be critically important for play, but it is good to read them because occasionally, some ear infections, depending on severity and length and things, will have different options for antibiotics. So it's good to read those case details. But for the most part, you'll be able to react just to the top line. And at the bottom, there's a hint about the type of antibiotics we're choosing here. So for infected eczema, depending on severity, you might be using a topical or an oral antibiotic to treat it. On the back of the card are the antibiotics that the game counts as correct. And these are typically derived from AAP guidelines, whether it's in pediatrics or the Red Book or IDSA guidelines. In this case, mupirocin, cephalexin, and clindamycin are the 3 antibiotic choices that would count as correct. And below that is a learning point, so a little bit more detail about what we want people to learn from this case. Some case cards, here is syphilis, will have alternative antibiotics as well. While penicillin is first line, sometimes that's not available or other situations come up, and doxycycline, tetracycline, and ceftriaxone would also, for the purposes of the game, count. But you'd want to read the fine print about when and why those antibiotics would be used typically. And at the very bottom of the cards is a list of common bugs that cause that clinical scenario. So, beta hemolytic strep and Staphylococcus aureus in the case of infections of eczema. So let's set the game up now that we know what the tools are in the game. We're going to take that playmat and put it on the table, and we will deal 5 antibiotic cards to each player that's playing, between 2 and 4 players, and put the remaining antibiotic cards in that top left corner where it says antibiotic deck. We'll then deal out the case cards. There will be 1 case card in each of those slots called 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the remaining deck of case cards will go in the slot called case deck, with the top card of that deck being in play. So they're all going to be in the same orientation, and all 5 of them are available and in play at the moment. We'll select our player to take the first turn and get going here. So a player will have 5 cards in their hand. They will select one antibiotic card from their hand and match it with one infection case on the table. In this case, our first player has matched amoxicillin with clavulanic acid to the dog bite. Once they have made that match, declared their guess, we'll flip over the case card and see what the correct answer is. So dog bite, depending on the situation, might be treated with amoxiclav or observed without antibiotics. So this is correct. There's a little bit more detail about situations in which you'd use one or the other, but both are correct for the purposes of the game. Because this player has gotten that correct, they will take that card, the dog bite card, and put it in front of them on the table. That's what we call their points pile. And to show that they've scored those 3 points available from that dog bite card. And they will put the used antibiotic card in the discard pile. The space that was occupied by the dog bite before will be refilled from the top of the deck, and the player will take 1 new antibiotic card to their hand, stocking their hand back up to 5 cards. Now let's imagine something else happened here. What if that player instead had used that observation card? What would have happened? Well, that was a correct choice, again, just like amoxiclav, but that observation card is special. So instead of going to the discard pile like amoxiclav does, the observation card goes to the point pile with the dog bite card. So this player's now scored 5 points off this case instead of scoring 3 points from treating it with amoxiclav. They will still draw a card regardless of what manner of treatment they did for this case. Let's move on to the next player's turn. So the next player's turn is up. They've got 5 cards in their hand. They need to match 1 card from their hand to 1 case on the table. Let's say they're going to try call pharmacy. They're going to use they don't have penicillin maybe. So they're going to use call pharmacy and say penicillin to treat primary syphilis. Well, that does work. And they will score those points. I'll also note this is the card that had the alternative. So they would also have collected this card had they used doxycycline, tetracycline, or ceftriaxone, but they are going to do a lot better job saving ceftriaxone and doxycycline for other higher scoring cards. Primary syphilis will go in front of them to their points pile, and the top of the deck will be revealed. So no shifting around of cards is necessary there. And the call pharmacy card goes into their discard pile. Let's now imagine a different situation. Let's say instead of using a correct answer, they tried something else. They tried trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole to treat syphilis. Unfortunately, that one will not be listed on the back of the card, and they've gotten it wrong. So when you got something wrong, what happens is you keep the antibiotic card, you draw a new antibiotic card, so now you're up to 6 cards in your hand, and that card that you treated remains on the table for someone else to try. So now we've all looked together at the back of that card. We know that penicillin is the right choice, and it's still out there available for 3 points for the next person who has penicillin in their hands. And the play will pass to the next person. So every turn you're going to draw a card, whether you got it wrong or right. Well, if you got it right, you're going to keep the case. If you got it wrong, the case is going to stay on the table, and you're going to keep your antibiotic card. At some point in the game, the antibiotic deck will be depleted. There'll be no antibiotic cards to draw at the end of your turn. When that happens, we just take that discard pile, shuffle it together, flip it over, and put it back for those antibiotics to be reused. And at some point in the game, the case deck is going to be empty. So there'll be no more new cases in that pile. When that happens, when we move it and reveal that there's no cases left, we're going to finish the round and the game is over. So each player will have the same number of turns. So if I was the first person to play and at the end of my turn, the case deck is empty, each other player will get 1 more turn. But just make sure you play so that whoever started, it would have been their turn next when they end the game. Everyone gets the same number of turns. Once the game is over, you can take a look at your spoils and the infections that you have successfully treated. You can, if you choose, add up the points and see who scored the most points. But I do want everybody to take a look at the back of the cards and give 1 learning point to the table to say what they have learned from playing the game as a teaching point to take home. So those are the instructions for Empiric Pediatrics. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and good luck with your sessions.